recording. Start streaming. Looks like we're streaming. And now for the intro music.
Big man, big boy man. Big boy man, big boy man. The big boy can't be out.
Wow, big man. Big man's here. Ooh, stinky little man. Ooh.
It's
big
funny that I have to
man's cool.
pretend that I hear it and like laugh when you laugh. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, I'll figure out how to do that.
I'm familiar with this.
Big man, big boy man. Alright, so we're live. Hey Dave.
Hey Joe,
Thanks.
it's nice to meet you.
Right? It's definitely the first time we've ever spoken.
Yeah.
This is really informal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen any of these yet.
I've watched.
Okay, cool. That puts you far ahead of most people I've had on. Yeah. Welcome. Who are you?
My name's Dave. You might know me. I guess I should say my last name too. My name's Dave Cox. I wrote A Rasp of Sand for ZineQuest 1. I'm writing Eat Trash Be Free for ZineQuest 2. I've been working on Americana for so long.
So long.
I'm Dastardly Dave on Twitter, without the second A. That's me.
Alright. Cool. Yeah, so you're one of the newer designers I have on the project. But you're also the newest designer that I have so far.
Cool. I'm a wee baby.
You are a wee baby. How did we meet?
Through, I think it was going to PAX U last December. And Cecil was like, "You going to PAX U?" And I was like, "Yeah."
That's
And
right.
he
We'd
said,
had like
"Well,
no interactions, and Cecil just connected us.
yeah,
Okay.
it's good stuff."
Yeah, that was a good time. And then we've spoken pretty much every single week since. First in...
Minimum.
Yeah, minimum. Yeah, totally. I mean, like, almost daily.
Yeah, pretty close.
First on Twitter, and then on Discord.
Yeah.
Before, like,
Absolutely.
even the world ended, and we had to stay inside, and it was our only form of human interaction.
Yeah, in the before times.
We don't talk about them.
We leave them where they are.
It's too hard to look
Absolutely.
back. So yeah.
When cons were real.
When cons are real, R.I.P. Gen Con still hasn't canceled, so that's fun.
Oh, it's done, dude. I'm not going now.
Of course, yeah, I'm definitely not either. Like, but it's technically still there for anyone who decides this was all fake media, fake news, and they needed to go to a con to show people who was boss.
What a big boy man they are.
Just the truly biggest of big boy mans.
Yeah.
Alright, so the way these have gone, which you will know, and people, if there's anybody watching, I don't have Twitch open, might know if they've seen this before, is this is pretty directionless, and
Okay.
I expect you to get drunk. And at the end of it, I Venmo
Straightforward.
you $50.
Okay.
And we talk about whatever the hell we want to. Now you expressed an interest in being asked questions, so if you can just
Well, I think like as the conversation moves on, there won't be a need for that.
yeah,
anymore.
but it's a good way to start.
Totally.
All right, I'm gonna I'm gonna just go from the top of my backer list. So 1, 2, 3. So 1 is Sean Richer. All of his questions are for Jared. That'll happen later. 2 is Richard. No questions. 3 is Samuel Lee Smith. What do we got? Inspirations, fears about publishing, what it's like to see a book or zine come to fruition, Favorite types of alcohol, best weed strains. Well, first of all, Sam, none of those are questions. Those are all statements. Um,
I will. That's fine though. Let's get started there.
cool. Pick any
What
of the above.
What was the first one?
Inspirations.
That's like a big one.
Yeah.
That's like a massive ask. But I'm here to please. I think it changes daily or based on the project because
Okay.
I am a person who locks myself off from. I guess I'm maybe what's the word for it? Hyper. See, moving the overlay.
Yeah.
Hyper. Damn it, I can't remember the word. No, I'm not even through with one beer. I get like hyper focused on like one thing, and I like will eventually burn myself out until the next thing comes along,
All right.
right?
So, like, what's your right now thing? That's easier.
Well, so when I'm working on a project, what my whole process is essentially to like lock myself off from like getting focused on something else, right?
Okay.
So I'm working on Eat Trash right now, and so um, inspiration for that has been mainly music. So um, a lot of blues, a lot of folk, a lot of like quote unquote like banjo punk style music has been my shtick.
What is banjo punk?
It's like it's kind of blues rocky, but instead of you focusing on like an electric guitar, it's more like banjo focused. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hard
Yeah,
to
I only
imagine,
really
but it
became
makes sense.
yeah. It I wasn't even really aware it existed until after I began the project, and I think I was talking to Linda about it, and she was like, "Oh, that sounds banjo punk as hell," and I was like, "Does what is
Does
that?"
it? All right.
And then I looked it up, and I was like, "All right, yeah, I'm down with that." Um, so yeah, locking myself off from that type of media, or from like essentially music, from music that doesn't align with that is pretty big, because music for me is like inherently uh, like it is a huge igniter of ideas because I find my design to be directed a lot by a feeling or theme or mood.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
so it makes sense, but it's also like directly contrary to how I process things. So I'm just like, go into it further.
Sure. Um so like when I am working on whether that be a game or a piece of art or whatever it may be, typically I am shooting for a mood, and not a mood is in terms of like mood lighting, but a mood is in like what is the overall feeling of the piece, right?
Okay.
So like for Eat Trash Be Free, it's like rebellious, it's sort of hyperactive and goofy, while having like an undertone of seriousness to it, right?
Okay.
Whereas if I'm working on like when I was working on Rasp or A Rasp of Sand, for instance, I was listening to a whole lot of like uh, instrumental kind of post rock, quieter, sadder music because that is the tone of that game. I guess like tone would be a better word for it than mood, honestly. Um, and I find that if like what I'm listening to while I'm working doesn't align with the piece I'm working on, it distorts the work I do.
Okay. That's it. So I guess my feeling on that, and I guess almost my trouble with it, is I think I'm a terrible judge of what people are going to take away from a mood standpoint of anything that I have any input on.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I don't think don't let it be I'm not inherently trying to impart that mood onto the consumer of whatever media I'm making. It's more for my own benefit. Um, if it does, cool. Like
Sure.
we're kind of aligned mentally on that. If not, that's like not the end of the world.
Okay.
It, it it's more so I keep focused.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Okay, fears about publishing. You're fairly new. You probably got a bunch still.
I don't know. I think that like I think the biggest fears were just like oddly enough financially, like knowing what you're doing with people's money, right? Like I wasn't too concerned about feedback. Like I was obviously like I wanted people to like it. Or as far as like Rasp goes, right? Like I wanted people to enjoy it and have a good time with it. But that wasn't a fear. It was more like a bonus, right? Like whenever I get someone who's like, yo, I really enjoyed playing through Rasp. I think it's really cool. Like it feels good and I love that. But not having that wasn't a fear. Does that make sense?
Sure.
It's like there was no like negative points there.
Okay,
it was just like it's all like positive. I'm like at a flat 0 throughout. Whereas like financially, I felt like I wasn't entirely certain how to do some things, and it was definitely a trial by fire. We did it, so I'm less concerned about it with Eat Trash. But yeah, and I think like the fear of, and to be fair, like I had like superb backers who are godsends and who I thank in my head every day, if not over Twitter or over Kickstarter, who were like super understanding because Rasp shipped like 5 months late, or 6 months late, something like that.
Yeah, I was like 5 seems low.
Yeah, something ridiculous. I think it was scheduled to be in like May and it ended up being in December.
Okay.
Now Rasp was like double the size of what was promised, so I don't feel bad about that. But I'm still like, well, I really dropped the ball on that deadline.
I'd show it. I used to have it right by my desk, but I moved it upstairs.
I think I got whatever. I'm not shilling my shit. I don't want to do that.
Shill your shit. Do it. Fuck it.
Yo, buy Rasp.
Buy Rasp.
Please.
Buy.
It looks nice, I think.
It does. It's good cover art. It's a good product. I got to play it.
Mako did a fantastic job on the cover, and Jake did a fantastic job on the interior art.
Yeah, and you did a great job on like the iconography and layout and all that shit. It's a good-looking book.
Thanks. Yeah, so honestly, like, I find Kickstarter to not be a very scary process, and I think people should do it. Like, if you didn't participate in ZineQuest 1 or ZineQuest 2 and you wanted to, if ZineQuest 3 happens, assuming like the world doesn't end, you should participate.
So I will say that Luke Crane, who is former head of games at Kickstarter, and Anya, who is currently head of games at Kickstarter, were on the Ludology podcast last week. And Luke basically just outright said, like, yeah, we're doing ZineQuest 3.
Cool.
So that's happening.
Yeah, y'all should participate. I don't know, like, how bonkers crazy it's going to be next year, but... Like,
so they said there was a 100% increase in participation from year 1 to year 2.
That does not surprise me.
Yeah. So cool. All right. We're just broad questions. Wow, a lot of people not asking any questions.
What do you think's gonna do we have? I'm sure we do. Someone's probably collected the number of like successful and unsuccessful scenes from last year.
How are we defining success?
Like funded. Well, no, not
Just
funded.
funded.
Sorry. That's not a good metric because some people set like ridiculously low funding goals.
Okay.
I would say I feel like my goal was very conservative, which was I think like
For which? For your trash?
yeah. I think Rasp was low in hindsight, but it was the first
Yeah.
year, so I don't know what they were doing.
Okay, so what is the question exactly?
Like, do you think we've hit? Man, I'm super curious for next year. Like, I think we probably. I guess depending on how the economy turns out will dictate all this, but like, do you see it going up another 100%?
Participate. So 100% was participation, right?
I want to know what percentage of those succeeded, and by a metric of succeed, I don't mean funded. I mean funded a reasonable amount.
So I mean, like, there are so many variables in that, right? Like,
right?
What is a reasonable amount? Are we talking like one standard deviation in excess of what they're seeking, or is it?
Well,
some
I mean, if
amount?
it's like a standard zine, right? So it's like 36 pages,
Sure.
and everyone backs that at like a $10 level, it gets the zine, right? Or more. Probably should be more. Then I don't know. I feel like $2,000 or $1,200 or $1,500.
So total number of projects at $1,500 or up for that or comparable dollar value for increased product size.
Yeah.
Do I think it's going up, stable, or going down?
I think it's going to go up either way. I just don't know.
I think it's either staying stable or going down in year 3.
Really? Okay.
I mean,
because of the economy, or because like people are hitting
yeah, I think
cap?
No, I think it's purely external. I think if things had not developed the way they did in the world, it might have continued up. Sorry, Bubbles is being fed.
Bubbles deserves to be fed.
Bubbles does deserve to be fed. This is true. She is a very good doggo. So, like, we are currently at an estimated 20% unemployment nationally.
Right.
CBO announced today that they are looking at probably 9.5% unemployment through the rest of the year as our low point.
Yeah, I heard that too.
1 in 10 people of the workforce being unemployed. ZineQuest 3 happens in February. I think belts are going to be real tight. I think you are going to see the lopsided nature of Kickstarter accelerate.
Where like the well-known projects get bigger.
Yeah, where like Frosthaven is currently above $8 million.
Right.
And like you will have outliers, right? I don't think this is Dispel Dice, right? First Kickstarter, pretty much a brand new company, raised for something million, I think, on a Dice Kickstarter. I think you're gonna see new people hitting the jackpot, but I think you're gonna see a lot more grouping of funds. Like, a smaller number of projects are going to receive a larger percentage of the overall funds.
Yeah, I could see that, because they're considered like a safer bet.
Yeah, and I think that's that's fundamentally counter to ZineQuest and Make 100 and initiatives like that.
Yeah.
I would love to be wrong. I
think you're on the right track, though.
Yeah, but I'm certainly not an optimist about this stuff. Okay, so Ray has the question, who would win in a fight, Joe or Cecil? Cecil.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'd be Cecil.
100%. No doubt in my mind whatsoever. Cecil would fucking whip my ass in like a few minutes flat. Alright, let's see who we got next. Lone Archivist, backer number 19. Balance. Okay, so this shouldn't bother me as much as it does. Why don't people know that a question ends in a question mark?
Question marks aren't necessary.
No, there's statements otherwise. All right, so
I mean, technically you're correct.
Lone Archivist has the statement: balance between unique design and innovation versus building on existing concepts and tropes. You did Rasp based on Knave, but you like substantially expanded what that game in and of itself offers. What was that process like? Was it are you glad that you did it that way? And you're doing something similar with Eat Trash. It's FITD.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. Wow, this is a potential to be a hot take, I guess.
That's why you're drinking, Dave.
Yeah. I'm only one in. I think I'm kind of a firm believer that there's like not enough modules and hacks, and there's probably too many systems. With a big asterisk at the end, where like, if you have a really cool idea for a system, do it. Now everyone thinks their system is really cool, so like, what really is a really cool system, right?
Yeah.
But I also think that like, pick a cool system that exists, that has like a somewhat decent sized following, and do your hack in that. Like, I think it's a better like. It like frees you up because the bones of the thing have been like tried and true, right? Especially if you're doing a small project like a zine, like you don't have to worry about like explaining basic mechanics and overall like bullshit that comes along with that. You're like, buy this book when you buy my book, or if you already have it. Otherwise, like, don't buy my book. Super easy. Now you're gonna have people who buy your book anyway and are like, where the hell are my rules? And then you're like, you didn't read. Like, sorry. But I think there's a ton of really good systems out there that don't have enough modules, don't have enough support, that could really use it. And I think what sells a game majority of the time isn't the rule set, it is the adventures and style of stuff you can do with it. So yeah, that's my sort of my take on it. I don't think I say that like as I'm working on a system, but I also think like if you're getting into design and want to publish, it's a way easier sell for you to do a hack or a module. And when I say a hack, by the way, like, let me be clear on what that means, because I feel like everyone's definition is different. I think of it like an expansion pack for like a video game, right? Like, Rasp comes with like an adventure module and a bunch of other rules that get like added on top of Knave. And Eat Trash is coming with an adventure module, a setting, and some rules that get tacked on, and some rules that overwrite. And I think the overwriting rule is a little bit risky, but like there was no other way for me to do Trash.
Mm-hmm.
I
like that.
Yeah, I think like that's what, in my opinion, and maybe that isn't a hack. I don't know. Maybe it's something that doesn't really have a name yet. But I really like the idea of people taking like a simple system, right? Which I think both Knave is simple in both like how it's presented, its actual game mechanic complexity, and its size, whereas Blades is simple in the words of like, it's easy to build things for it. Not mechanically, it's not. It is a very dense game, but you can very easily, like, I had a conversation with Pamo the other night where it was like, you can very easily do other really cool shit with Blades. It is like a toolbox. Take it, do cool shit with it. Like, all of the people who are making these systems don't require you to like pay them royalty fees off of what you do. Like, and if you're a new designer, you probably don't have, and I say this about myself, like, you don't have the experience, in my opinion, necessary to like completely build a whole new system. Maybe that's my hot take, right? Where it's like,
you can have more than one.
Yeah, where it's like you should maybe. I think it's a better idea for you to do a hack to begin with and get your feet wet and meet people and talk to people and like experience the process of like making a book if you haven't made one before. Mm-hmm. And then you also get the added benefit, just like marketing wise, of like you're now tied to like John Harper, right? If you do a Blades thing, or you're tied to Ben if you do a Knave thing, or you're tied to whoever if you do a game for that system, like that, and especially if they like it, that's like fantastic.
I mean, this is like, it's not just an RPGs thing, right? Like, this is classic, the arc of the video game industry, where
Right.
like, how do you get started? You become a modder, you make levels, right?
Yeah, I guess like really it is a mod.
Yeah, it's
like
it's
maybe that's
it's
a better word than hack.
it's somewhere between a mod and DLC.
Yeah, where it's like do the cool small thing, especially like, and that's why I keep saying like do ZineQuest, do ZineQuest, do ZineQuest, do ZineQuest, do something small, do something reasonable, do it for something other than like D&D or whatever. Yeah, do it something other than D&D because it's too big of a pool. Pick something small, and if you pick like the OSR, pick like an OSR rule set to where like all the people who are like about that rule set are like, bam, give me that.
Sure, I mean, that was kind of so concrete example. That was the expansion around Black Hack, right? Where you had like all these things from like Rad Hack and Cthulhu Hack and yada yada yada, where there were just like dozens of them.
Yeah,
Always a good way to get your feet wet. Okay,
totally.
cool. I like it. Let's see what else people got to ask. If only more people would ask questions, this would have... Wow, so somebody just said serious games.
No, serious games don't exist.
Serious games don't exist? Wow,
No,
that's actually a fucking hot take. You're not necessarily the person I want to ask about serious games, because it is like a whole last thing.
It's a whole last thing.
Yeah, it's like serious games is like a topic. It's a umbrella. It's games used for purposes other than fun.
Okay, gotcha. I think that exists, but I think like every game's inherently goofy and can devolve into comedy. And
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about things here that are like the gamification of airport, like, queuing systems.
Yeah.
Like, things that, like, really aren't fun, but they're like or like training simulations and things like that.
Totally.
Ray says there's no fun in games. I'm with you, Ray. Games suck. They're fascinating objects, and I wish they didn't exist. Tyler Crumrine, who did... Tyler had a pretty successful Kickstarter. Which one was he? Is he, Beak and Bone? Yeah, Beak, Feather, and Bone. Shit, I had no idea this dude backed me. Cool. Minimalism versus maximalism.
I think there's enough. Are we speaking? And I guess like we can choose that.
Broadly, personally, your preferences as a player, your preferences as a designer, whatever the hell you want. It's just minimalism versus maximalism.
Minimalism every day.
Minimalism every day.
Yeah, like I think it's fun. Like, to me, the idea of like a maximalism game would be like a Euro game, right? Like a Euro board game where you're simulating this huge mono, sort of like, mono is the wrong word, but like just a huge system, right? And when I say system, both mechanically and narratively, where like maybe you are simulating a town or a country even, or a planet in some cases. And that's cool, but I don't get the same warm, fuzzy bleed feelings from that I get from doing a minimalist, much smaller scale RPG. Now, I'm totally down with like where the minimalist becomes maximalist, or whatever. Yeah, where like you're the small effect, or the small beer's starting to get to me. The smaller actions begin to explode into larger consequences is super cool. But yeah, minimalist.
Probably same. I think for a long time I wanted to be a maximalist because
Yeah.
I came in not on systems but on lore.
Mm,
And when you love lore, maximalism is your shit.
totally. I think most people go through that arc where like, and when I say it's an arc, I mean like you as a human being have a perspective, right? Which is inherently minimalist. It's very personal, and then you find out like RPGs or like games where you or other media where you can like experience um the point of view of other people and other ideas. And when I say ideas, I mean like potentially taking on the role of like a country or a planet or whatever it may be. It's like super super appetizing, right? Because you're like, it's a unique point of view. I've never experienced that before. That sounds really cool. And then you get into it, and I don't know if it's because there's no way to accurately perceive what that is like, or if, and hopefully this is parsing and making sense, but like it seems like most people like typically come back around unless they're just very interested in like the like from a strategy like, and when I say this overall I mean games in general, where it's like if you're very interested in like systems and whatnot, that's something completely separate. I'm talking about like narrative and kind of like diving into the like, I guess role play would be the right word, sort of. Like you're role playing as like, I want to be the ruler of a country, right?
Sure.
Like when you play sit down to play Civilization, the first time I sat down to play Civilization, I was like, oh cool, I get to rule a country, right? Or like Age of Empires, same thing. Like,
Sure.
yeah, let's do it. And then like eventually what hooked me to those games wasn't the fact that I was role playing a country or the leader of a village or whatever it may be. It was like just the systems and watching the gears kind of mesh and watch those things work.
See, that's fascinating to me, which is like I am a big strategy game player and I do not do any role in habitation when I play those. But I never have.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
There was never a point in my life where like I sat down to play SimCity and thought of myself as the mayor.
That may have been just a me thing.
No, I mean it's a thing I've heard, right? For Austin Walker, right, who runs Vice Games, formerly Waypoint, has spoken about this a lot. About like he did a huge XCOM playthrough that was all about RPing through XCOM, which is a game that like doesn't really provide any genuine framework for roleplay. Like your characters have names, but like they're interchangeable beyond their stats. And like, what does it look like when you RP through a game that doesn't hold your hand on that level?
Totally.
And there are people who love that. It's just, I don't know. It's interesting to hear you describe that as a universal.
It to be fair, it probably isn't a universal. Like I know tons of people who play Pathfinder and like 3.0 and 3.5, which are entirely invested in just seeing the numbers go up, right?
Like you can do role and habitation of those. It's not.
You can
their point.
totally. They're not mutually. They're not. Those two ideas are not mutually exclusive.
Sure.
They can work at the same time. I'm getting completely lost in my own conversation, but essentially, like, my thing was, I started out role inhabiting, moved into this idea of like, oh cool, like let's see these numbers come up, and then eventually came back down to this point of like, what's really fascinating isn't seeing the numbers go up, right? Like that's the expected. It's sort of, oh, okay. Well, here's an actual topic I care about. now that we're getting there, it's why like I don't like levels and I don't like experience points.
Okay.
As, like a mechanic at all, and it's why I'm removing them from systems I'm actually working on, where the numbers are ultimately meaningless and they're ultimately not surprising. And I think surprises are what excites me as a player more than anything else.
Okay, so abstraction as a lever for surprise.
Yes.
I mean, so
like when you know you're like, I have like 10 XP points to go before I hit level 3, right?
Sure.
and you're like, well, that means I'm probably gonna hit level 3 by next session, which is inherently like expected. Which means that like when I ding, I'm not super thrilled about it. Beyond the fact that just like, hey, my numbers went up, cool. What I
It's
find way more exciting,
anticlimactic.
yeah, what I find much more rewarding is narratively driven character advancement, which is
Okay.
It's kind of weird because like some of the, like I think the bigger boys are starting to move in that direction. With like for instance with 5e, where you essentially have like checkpoint based or milestone based character advancement, right? Like,
Sure.
it happens when it should happen.
Rather than XP for gold or something like that.
Right. And yes. And what I am pushing towards with, it's weird because I guess like I should mention this as well. I worked on Tempered Legacy, which was David Schoederen's project for ZineQuest 2. That was sort of my first official attempt at this in a way. The character advancement rules are kind of pushing in that direction more, where it's like the player, when the character accomplishes something, the player then goes into almost a Blade style ritual creation question and answer session with the GM, and they choose how their character changes based off of the experience they just went through, right?
Okay.
It's wishy-washy.
Sure.
And it's not concrete, but I think that's okay. And I think the more we get away from the idea of like a balanced RPG, the better. And
Okay, that's I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a hot take, but it's a take that has a lot of legs. So one of the things that I've observed in like the short period of time I've known you, right, which is now, it's not even half a year, really, is like what's a good example of this? How we kind of always poke fun at you for like like just do a belonging outside belonging game, Dave. Right? Like
okay.
you start at this place of numbers and crunch, right? And I guess the first time is Knave, right? Which is pretty light for that kind of thing. But I've seen you steadily move away from this. Do you think you're going to circle back around, or do you think this is just kind of like the evolution of where your head has always been at and what you've gained exposure to in the past little while?
No, I think I still live in the idea that like, okay, I don't think crunch inherently has to have numbers.
Okay.
So I guess like the best way I can kind of explain my sort of frame of mind on this is like, novels and stories and poems have rules, right?
Sure, sort of. Yeah,
They can, let me rephrase that. They can have rules.
Yeah.
Though that structure, I think, is something that I'm really fascinated in from a RPG standpoint, where like I like the idea of having systems that don't require you to inherently do math.
So what, like subbing in narrative conventions for subbing in literacy for numeracy?
Yes.
Okay.
In a way. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. We're kind of like, okay, so for like now okay, so I guess the best example would be for like Tempered Legacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
There, with the series of questions, it's like what did you do that prompted you? Essentially, like at the end of each session, right? Any player can raise their hand or bring to the GM's attention, or the GM can, to say like, I think my character experienced something that would change them.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if one or both parties, essentially, like if the table or the GM and the player come to an agreement on that, they then move into this system, which is very similar to Blades, where you make rituals, where it's like, okay, well, what did you do that prompted this to happen?
Okay.
Right? So you're already creating this, like, essentially, like, it's all a bunch of, like, if-then statements. So kind of coding-like in a way, where
Okay.
like if you feel you've experienced something, then enter into these question phase.
Hmm.
Whoever prompted the thing
Mhm.
says, "Okay, well, or you climbed this mountain. It was very difficult, and it was dangerous, and I think it would have changed my character." Okay, cool. What piece of equipment do you have on you which would um, inhabit this change? Like, what did you use while climbing that mountain that would potentially? So, say you had climbing gear, right?
Sure.
You say like, well, the climbing gear would be the thing.
Mhm.
So that's two phases of this equation done. You've done what caused it, what is being affected by it,
Mhm.
and then you move on to the next phase, which is like, well, how does it change your character?
Okay.
Okay. And this is where it gets a little wishy-washy, and this is where I come into the whole idea of like, RPGs aren't concrete.
Mhm.
There's no reason for them to be concrete. It's an open, it's verbal storytelling. It's all spoken word. Like if something is wrong, have a conversation and fix it, and or figure out a creative way to make it better. Which is this weird thing I have, which I know a lot of people don't agree with, where like the game designer has a responsibility to essentially solve those social problems for the table. But I am firmly in the camp of like, they're all adults at the table. Have an adult conversation. If you've given a player something that is like breaking the game, then just explain that to the player, right? Like,
Sure.
if your player can't handle that conversation, then maybe that player shouldn't be playing at your table. Like, if you're like, hey, you're taking away the spotlight from everyone else at your table, I made a little goof up. Let's tone this back a bit. So essentially, the next question, which I was leading into, is, what does this do for you? So maybe the climbing gear makes it to where like, now you can take your grappling hook from the climbing gear and throw it way, way, way far. And wherever you stick it, it just slams into the wall, and you can use that to climb up. The whole point is to do things which aren't numerically based. It's supposed to make it to where like you can now use your grappling hook, and it's almost like it's coated in this super adhesive, right? So you can climb almost anything with it.
Mhm.
It's supposed to be really cool and really weird, and you can use it as a form of leveling up by saying like, okay, well, I get like +2 strength, so I can climb better now.
Sure.
But we encourage you to do something weirder, because that's more fun. Because no one is like, wow, I got +2 strength on my longsword. They're more like, wow, my longsword can catch on fire now, and I can use it as a torch and light things up. Like, that's way more cool.
So that brings up a question that I wonder about a lot, which is, like, there has been this general trend, right? And it's been up and down, but I'd say, like, overall, you chart from the beginning of the hobby to now, and things have moved toward what might have once been called the narrativist direction. I don't really like GNS theory, but, like, it works. Um, You sound exactly like Luke when he tries to goof on stats. Uncanny. Yeah, I can believe it, Mary. I wonder. It always ends in a triangle, Ray. So, all right, this is if you're not in chat, if this is, I need to figure out a way to put chat on the screen, because when this goes on YouTube, we're just going to be talking about shit that people can't see. All right. So, has there been a progressive arc toward narrative reinforcement over mechanical reinforcement, or not mechanical, numerical reinforcement over time? And is it that we never realized that narrative was cooler early on, right? Like, you go back to the 80s, a +1 longsword was cool. But you're right. Now, if I gave a kid a +1 longsword, that sucks ass. That's a terrible magic item.
I think it just starts it with, I mean, it's a war game to begin with, right? Like,
Early days, yeah.
yeah, like, I think that's just a holdover.
And it's just like they didn't know it was ignorance, and once they knew better, we moved on.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe ignorance isn't the right word, because I don't know if you can use D&D as a good example for this, just because there's so much baggage.
Okay.
I mean, I think if you want to look at a good example of it, it's like just like a 4E to 5E, right? Like they tried to change too much,
Sure.
hit them in the ass, they walked it back.
Move back. Okay, so I've never done this before, but I desperately need to take a bio break.
That's
So
totally
I'm gonna
fine.
call 3 minutes on this, and
Sick.
you can just talk to the assembled peanut gallery if you
No,
want.
actually, I'm gonna do the same because this beer's running right through me.
Cool.
You don't need a BRB screen. Just kidding. Joe does need a BRB screen. What's going on, everybody? I see Nate's here, and I'm pumped about it. Who all's in here? Richard, Nage, Mary. I don't know that. Is that Kev Dog? Nate. Commander Root, which I believe is a bot. That, or Commander Root, is someone who shows up at my streams occasionally. Ray. Dude, yeah, Nate, why don't you just let us all use your tunes for free? Dude, Ray, Root is my favorite viewer. Don't take Root away from me. We could pay Nate to do. What if we all pulled money and just hired Nate to do like a Titter Pig soundtrack? Titter Pig. Could we just call the album Titter Pigs and it's just a pig kind of lopsided acting like it's tittering off of its feet? Nate, are you game? This is live, so I feel like I'm putting you on the spot, and I apologize. So you could just like message us in Discord and be like, no. Because I'm seriously interested. Like, I'll just take some of this money Joe's paying me plus some more, whatever it would cost, and we'll collab. We need the live reaction. Camera pans to Nate, just shakes his head no.
Alright, we're back.
Hello.
Hello. Sorry, I'm not doing a BRB screen. How do I even do that?
You ask Mary nicely.
Mary, please make me a BRB screen. Sorry, I had a coffee with 6 shots of espresso in it earlier, and then I had a cup of cold brew.
That'll do it.
Yeah. Mary says, give me 5 minutes. Cool. I mean, you could... Unionize Mary?
Unionize Mary.
No. Triangle
It's a very
shirtwaist fire.
Very personal question, Nate.
This is not that different from other days, Richard. All right, I gotta figure out a way to put chat on the screen. I have Twitches.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's not that. I think you can use Streamlabs to do it, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm sure you could.
Ray will be able to tell you.
There's a widget. Cool. I don't know what widgets are, but I believe you. So web.
Good old
What is a
webhook.
webhook? That sounds like a thing you use to fish. All right.
Fishing for those web fish. Good old StreamYard.
Mary was asking me earlier if I was enjoying doing these online, and today is the day that stopped.
It was my interview, everyone. I killed everything.
Yeah. All right. I don't know where we even were. I'm gonna jump back to the question bucket. See what we got.
can just talk about like 4E and how it was the best thing D&D's done in 50 years.
Most important lesson learned the hard way.
Don't let your Kickstarter run over the tax season.
Okay, tell me more.
Don't let it do that. Like I'm going to be paying a lot of taxes because I didn't ship Rasp in that tax year.
Okay.
That are going essentially like you can't write it off.
Okay.
Until the next year, which means a lot, not all, but a lot of the funds from Rasp are now taxable until next year.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go any more into my own financial standing, but it's not ideal. I'd prefer it if that wasn't the case.
Okay.
So all new ZineQuest people, if you ever read this, because I don't think there's any unknown people in this chat right now.
No. This is what ends up
let it
happening.
go.
It's just our friends.
Don't let it lapse. Don't be dumb like me.
Good to. I mean, this is a lesson for me as well.
Yeah. Also, don't do that, Joe. Send that shit print that shit that year. Anyways, that answers that question. That's by
Yeah.
far the biggest thing.
Yeah, seriously. That's a big one.
It could 100% screw someone who doesn't have a super super solid day job.
Yeah, I
Who
mean,
can,
that could, like, straight up ruin your life.
Yeah, if I'm lucky enough that I do have a decent day job and can essentially just eat that cost for a year, but don't do it, y'all. Don't do it.
Okay. I like it. Ba, 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 ba. I do want to talk about 4E. We can talk about 4E.
Let's talk about 4E.
Yeah, let's talk about 4E.
It's fantastic.
4E is incredible.
4E.
So the
Well, I take
reason.
it back. Sorry.
No.
Essentials
You just
is
took it back. Why? Essentials is incredible.
Yeah, 4E itself is okay. Essentials is fantastic. Essentials is the best thing D&D's done, maybe ever.
I mean, that's a big claim. You gotta
Well,
go into that more.
besides like the idea of if you agree that RPGs were created by D&D, then yeah, sure. Then that's the biggest thing.
But, like, as a product, Essentials is the best thing. Oh, I mean, say why.
It was the best layout they've ever had, the best format they've ever had. It was the easiest thing to GM, in my opinion, which I know is an opinion that not everyone else has. I think 4E is like a breeze to GM, and I would do it any day of the week. Yeah, it's
Okay, so tell
it's a beautiful book.
What is the difference between Essentials and 4E? Broadly.
4E or Essentials was WotC's life raft for that edition. And it was a damn good one, but I think the ship had sailed on that edition at that point.
Unfortunately.
If it had been their like first, I don't even think it would have succeeded, even if it was their first shot. They screwed that pooch.
I think if 4E or something like 4E came out alongside 5E or something like 5E, both would have been wildly successful for different segments of the market.
Why the fuck did they not just make 4E Gamma World? Why did they not just be like, this is Gamma World?
Well, I think the original plan for 4E wasn't even to have it replace 3.5. It was to have it would have been a kind of supplementary war game that people could play with tactical minis, because like that was big at the time, right?
Well, and the weird thing is, like, there's really, other than, and I know we were talking about this today, where like Gloomhaven is probably the closest you can get nowadays.
Sure. I mean, I would argue that you could do it in something like Warcry, which is the skirmish.
Still around?
Yeah, the skirmish rules Games Workshop thing for Age of Sigmar. Yeah, that's still around.
I thought it wasn't. Okay.
No, it's still around and done quite well.
The exact same though.
Sure, I mean, there's not as much of a narrative element to it.
I think 4E's rad.
4E is great.
I
love 4E.
I need someone, whether that's me or someone else, to make. Like, Drive-Thru does print-on-demand trading cards.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell are we doing? Like,
I mean, you can get all of 4E Gamma World in POD, I think.
Can you really?
Yeah, I mean, I have all of 4E Gamma World in PDF, and I picked up several of the expansions in PDF, and I'm pretty sure they're in POD as well. I don't know how they do a box. I don't think they would. They'd probably send like the rules documents as a book and then the cards.
Shit. You totally can.
That is the only game I've ever gotten rid of that I feel sad that I got rid of.
You made a horrible mistake.
I got rid of
Have you seen how much it's going for now?
Yeah. I got rid of a like basically unused Gamma World 4A box.
I'm kicking myself that I never bought it back in the day.
I've had it twice. I had it back in the day, and I got rid of it, and then I got another copy of it in like 2016, and then I got rid of it when I moved to Austin.
Fuck.
I'm dumb as shit.
Dude, it's on sale right now. I might grab the print-on-demand
On
version.
drive-through?
Yeah.
How much is
so
the
y'all
POD?
go out there and get. It's it's half off. It's from 40 to 20.
Shit. I mean,
And
if you got
30
money,
for both. I might do that tonight. Because I was thinking about running 4E for some friends, and I think it could be more fun to run Gamma World because it's goofy and
4A Gamma World is incredible.
yeah. My one complaint is wait, hold up, maybe I'm remembering this wrong. Was 4E Gamma based off of Essentials 4E or Basic 4E?
I honestly don't know. It's a good question.
Because I don't know if I have much of an interest in Basic 4E.
Okay.
But if it was kind of more Essentials based, which I guess now that I think about it, it probably is Basic 4E because they make it to where, if I remember correctly, you can essentially just get like a power. There's no like prereqs for powers. It's just like
yeah,
you get a weird shit.
It's
You get some weird shit.
It's all draw of the cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I could run it on Titterpigs. Nate.
Yeah, I mean, we'd need to use like Roll20 or something, because
I was thinking-
you can't
Yeah,
do
you
Theater
have
of
to
the
have it.
Mind. You need the grid.
You know what's wild? Why?
Lots, but like, tell me.
Like, why? Why have they not tried this again? Like, it's the
4E?
perfect time. Like, why is there just not a D&D board game or like video game that runs on 4E? Which I guess like the MMO kinda did, but it was like a bastardization and was all really shitty.
So there are a couple things I could say. One, it might be coming. WotC opened a digital studio in Austin 2 years ago that has mostly been working on Magic the Gathering Arena, but apparently was doing some D&D stuff that I think John Tynes is heading up. So who knows? Could be coming.
Okay.
Two, the market moved away from tactical minis. And, like, I think it's starting to come back, but, like, the big
so
trad
weird and
pubs
different,
haven't
though.
realized.
The trad pots.
Well, like, you have Gloomhaven, right? Which is doing
Yeah.
great.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Frosthaven's above 8 million now. The second edition Gloomhaven Kickstarter was like 3.5 million. The first edition was only like 300,000, but still, I mean, that's a lot. But like,
Right.
this is not the same as like the early mid-aughts, or I guess the late aughts, where like you had Warcry and Warhammer and
War Machine.
and, or I guess you didn't have Warcry. I was thinking War Machine. You had HeroClix. You had all these mini-based things.
Malifaux.
Malifaux. Yeah, I think Malifaux's still
Those are
around.
great. Is it really?
Yeah. Like, the market was way more welcoming of mini shit then, and I think the hunger is there. Like, you're seeing it with people playing Gloomhaven, but the pubs haven't realized it yet.
Yeah, I think we're looping hard on that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm kind of pumped for it.
I think the first mid-size indie to come out with something similar to 4E in the next year does unbelievably in the market.
Did you ever play the video game Card Hunter?
Let me look it up real quick. Sounds
It's from the
familiar.
same people who did, man, what was that game that just came out recently that was really weird?
Yes, I did play this and I loved it.
Why does that not exist? And I know functionally it's a real pain in the ass to have like this equipment that dictates the cards in your deck, but like that is an RPG I want to play.
100%. Yeah. That game is rad. That is a great game.
Yeah.
Are they still
like,
updating
co-op
that?
is fun as hell. If they had ever gone in and just been like, we're adding more classes,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been all over that.
Yeah. They didn't. They
I have
never did
a
any
friend who
deals.
I have a friend who's in school right now for like video game design and dev, and him and I have been talking about like doing an homage to that at some point. And
I feel
'Cause
like something like it, right? Like something reminiscent of that comes out once every couple of years.
I don't think anyone's nailed it though.
No, no. Well, I mean, I think this is the issue, right? Where you were detailing earlier how kind of the narrativist impulse, if you want, the impulse to move away from numerical mechanization, is what makes RPGs distinct. But then we're talking about this almost completely opposite product class.
Well, no. Hold on now. Hold on. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive.
Okay. How do you
So
make something like 4E, but using something like Tempered Legacy's advancement? What does that even look like?
I think you make it so 4E did a really smart thing, right? When you make positioning matter, it allows you to turn combat into something more than a numbers game.
Positioning, you need to clarify, like
So
not
like
fictional positioning, right?
yes, when you well, both theoretically, though I've never been a huge fan of like um theater of the mind positioning when they try to like make that more strategic. That's never been my shit. When essentially when you're like, well, you're in close range, medium range, long range, you can do
Sure.
certain things close, medium, or long. You can also move between those two different distances, but I think there's something to having a grid, and I think now, from like a modern standpoint, it's never been cheaper to make that available to the consumer.
Sure.
And I think that there's less of a need to have like Nate the other day. I think it was Nate was talking about how he wanted printable miniatures. Maybe it wasn't Nate. Who was that? Someone was talking about it, and they were like, "I want printable minis, which I can like color, and then like use cardstock to stand up." Right? Like you don't need to do. I mean, it's literally what Card Hunter did. But they did it in a way, like, they did it for video games. They had no reason to do that. It was arguably harder for them to do that than to do a 3D model and animate it. It was crispy. Thanks. Right. So, what I think is interesting is I think you can do a... Now, where it becomes trickier is, like, the more you make it a war game, the more balance comes into being a necessity.
Yeah, and I don't know what balance absent numeracy looks like.
I think it becomes a lot of like trusting your GM and trusting the player. I think it becomes a lot more social contract.
Okay.
Now, that's a whole nother can of worms on like how much trust you should give your GM and player, but I am firmly in the camp of like you should give, beyond having like safety tools in place and having like social constructs in place to where like no one's being exploited or taken advantage of, you should trust the person you're playing a game with. Con games are weird. Con games should have their own... It's kind of like Adventurers League, right? Where you kind of need your own special caveat for like showing up at the table and sitting down with a rando. But the same is true of video games in a weird way, where it's like... You go into those situations differently. Like when I sit down to play League of Legends with my friends, it's a very different situation than when I go down and play League of Legends with like randos.
Yeah.
I definitely think there exists like, and I think 4E was kind of heading in that direction, which is why when I've talked about like how I would remix 4E, it's almost like I would divide it up by power system, right? Where like 4E had those like power sources. They had like martial,
for
divine,
people,
arcane source.
We should probably lay out just very briefly for anyone who doesn't know much about 4E, like how did 4E function? Why was it so weird?
Yeah, so 4E essentially functioned on like every character or every class had like spells. In like a classic D&D sense. 5e still kind of has it, but they've like removed a lot of the things which made it really easy to talk about it. All of the systemization has been removed, and they're like, nah, this is unique to this class, and really it's not. Essentially, you had four different types of abilities. You had like at will, which could be cast or used as many times as you want in a combat. You had encounter, which could be used once per combat, or essentially once per combat. You had utility, which could be used theoretically outside of combat or inside of combat. They were supposed to be the like RP-like abilities. I think that's where they stepped in the poo. They're just like not included those at all. And then you have dailies, which could theoretically be used once per rest, or once per long rest, I think, technically. So what that did is they gave that to every class. Every class had those effects. It allowed them to do things. Most of them were essentially based around positioning, or controlling the way opponents move. It's almost like they took D&D and turned it into a chess game, which is really, really interesting. And where I was coming at it from a narrative perspective is, essentially, D&D made it to where those powers scaled right. Your at-will first-level power would scale based off of your strength. You theoretically could hold on to that at-will first-level power through your entire arc of a character, and it'd be just as effective at first level as it was at second level. I think that's good. And this is why I kind of push back against people when they say that 4E was a numbers game. I don't think it was. What was a numbers game about 4E was the feat system. The feats should have been ripped out by the roots and replaced with like 5E style feats, and it would have been 5 times better. Where I come at it from a narrative perspective is if you make it to where it's not a numbers game, and you make it to where like most of the powers are based on like changing the position of your opponents, changing how the battlefield performs, how do you, almost like how Divinity Original Sin 2 handles combat, where it's like you change the battlefield, you change what your opponents can do, you change I mean, obviously dealing damage is part of it, but like all these statuses should be what is being tweaked by the powers, not how much damage you do. That's not interesting from like a character advancement or combat perspective, because you're always going to pick the thing which does the highest number damage, right? If your at will does 10 damage and the rest of them do 5 damage, you're going to pick the 10 damage one no matter what the status effect is, unless there's like some extraneating circumstances, but like who gives a fuck? That's not exciting. And that's why I don't think 4E was quite as numbers heavy as people make it out to be, especially when you look at classes like the Wizard, which were considered controllers, which was kind of D&D's term for it was classes for classes, which dictated like kind of how they performed in combat, like what their role was. Where you're like moving the opponent around, you're changing the perspective and like messing with how they work. The one thing which I don't really know how you deal with is the problem which 4E had with people when it's not their turn just sitting there and staring at their abilities and being like, what do I do next turn? I don't know how you solve that beyond maybe like printing a card which says like ad lib and think of something cool and like just like put that in front of every class. But I don't even know if that really solves the problem. I don't know. And the weird thing is I think I want to see that system applied to multiple forms of conflict in an RPG as well. I want to see it applied to like a social conflict, because I think that could be really fast. Like, have you looked at Griftlands at all yet, Joseph or Joe?
No.
I looked at your name. You should look at Griftlands.
Alright, typing it in now.
It's by it is not a tabletop RPG. It is a video game. But it's by the same people who did Don't Starve.
Okay.
Essentially, Griftlands is a deck building game, but you have 2 decks. You have one that is for physical conflict, so when violence begins to happen, and you have one for social interaction.
Okay.
And it turns social interaction into a competitive card game. And
I like it. So it looks very Slay the Spire. But
it is very Slay the Spire, but there are 2 separate decks, and you play through a narrative.
I like it.
That is what I want to see. I want to see like this weird version of 4E where like you're using cards. Maybe your deck is the character sheet. Something Jared was talking about in chat today too, where like how you build, like you don't have a character sheet. Instead, you have a stack of cards, and maybe like every card has an identity associated with it. So like strength cards do certain things, but almost like in Magic, right? Where instead of like you have a red card, you have a strength card. And maybe like when you have your hand and you're like, what do I want to do this turn? And you look at your hand and you're like, well, I need to lift this gate. Well, lifting that gate is going to be hard. I'm going to roll a d20. So you roll a d20. And you're like, you don't succeed on lifting that gate, and the GM is like, you missed it by 4, and you look at your hand and you have 4 strength cards in your hand. You're like, I discard 4 strength cards, and I get like +4 to my strength, and I lift that gate. And then maybe on like short rests you draw,
I like this.
or like something. I don't know. It's
no,
something I'm, like,
no. I mean,
kicking around.
it's neat. I like it. Who knows how it works balance wise, but like as a broad concept, it's clever.
I want more cards in RPGs.
I do
is
too.
The story.
Here's the thing. I don't like dice.
Yeah.
I've never liked dice.
I get it. Well, I think it's not that I dislike dice, because I do like dice, but I think that there should be other forms of conflict resolution in RPGs rather than dice.
I've always preferred cards. Give me a deck builder with a narrative overlay.
You know what I like?
Do you like that beer?
I do, actually. It's
I'm
surprisingly good. I was really worried I was not going to like it.
Yeah, I know. I just remembered that.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But what were you actually going to say you like?
I think we've spoken about this in the past, but Fantasy Flight's Arkham Horror card game does not use dice, and it does not use cards for conflict resolution. It uses a bag of chits.
We have spoken about Arkham Horror.
And the bag of chits is ingenious. You get to scale the difficulty of a conflict by adding more or removing more chits from the bag. You can change what the chits do in the bag. You could even just have a system as like an indie RPG, right? So say you're like, print and play indie RPG. You cut out a bunch of different symbols, and then you're like, well, for this encounter, it's more difficult. So the symbols that meant this before now mean this. And it entirely changes how the conflict plays out.
We are so stuck in the rut of thinking about dice as the fundamental unit of resolution in RPGs, where like we think the big conversation is D20 versus 2D6.
Nope.
And it's like, nah, these are the same thing in the broad scheme, right? Like I don't look to any other
even
vertical.
Like, what was that game that came out like 2 years ago where they're like, you can edit the faces of the dice, and I was like,
as a
why? Just make a bag of, like, you're essentially turning a dice into a deck of cards.
Just make a bag builder. Do it as a cards, like any other thing.
You're overcomplicating this so hard. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, I want to see more games that use other forms of resolution rather than dice. Especially because, like, dice are expensive to make.
Yeah.
If you want to make, like, custom dice, that costs a shit ton. If you want to make a custom set of cards or a bunch of chits are cheap as shit.
Chits are just
But
card
paper.
stock. Yeah.
Not even. Like, you could do it on printer paper and make it cheap.
I mean, you can get like fucking resume paper at Staples, and it'll be stable enough.
Yep.
All right. Well,
grab a cup, put them in there, and shake it.
We are at an hour 20, pretty much.
Oh shit, we're done.
We're done. This was fun. I'm glad we finally we started slow, but we got to a point where shit just kept rolling, which was good.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
figured that would be the case.
Well, I will.
Cool.
I'll talk to you in like 5 minutes. But for everyone else, you won't. And bye. Hope you enjoyed.
See y'all.